Okay, welcome back. We are finishing what we start, chapter 6 already. We've only got a couple of chapters left, but this chapter, I love what the author says right from the beginning. He says this chapter promises to kick your butt, and it's full of powerful techniques to ensure that you jump into action. Without further ado, let's jump in. And I love this because it's all about distractions. I've actually did a video before regarding studying and setting up an environment for success. And a lot of the stuff that was in this chapter kind of reminded me of that video that I had done. When it comes to being successful, being great at what we do, we are procrastinators, we are lazy, we sound like terrible people. Actually, we don't. We just like to enjoy ourselves, okay? We're not procrastinators, we just like to do things that we like to do. With that, there is also things that we have to do. So he says that the first thing we should try to do is minimize distractions. We often think that distractions can be our friend. I am not sure how one would think a distraction would be a friend. But then, as I said that out loud, I recognize that, oh, of course, because, my distractors are things that I enjoy, whether or not it's eating a brownie randomly or picking up my phone and scrolling through social media, playing a game, listening to my favorite podcaster or watching a video on YouTube. These are my friends. These are the things that I like to do. This is how I like to spend my time. I understand now what my distractions are. Picking up the phone, calling a friend, talking to my husband, playing with my dog. We have to minimize these distractions. The author says if you're constantly distracted, you succumb to temptations without even giving yourself a chance to exercise your willpower. And so I think that as he continues to go through this chapter, he starts to get more and more detailed about what it means to minimize distractions. But I always err on the side of, I know that you're smart and I know that you know what that means. I know that you have been told to do these tactics a million times and I know that you haven't tried. So if you are trying to be successful at something and you haven't been successful at that thing, I encourage you to finish something that you have put your mind to. Finish something, pick a goal, get excited about it, get passionate about it, and minimize your distractions. Put them away. That doesn't mean that you have to eliminate your distractions. And maybe that's where we feel like we have to eliminate it, like we have to get rid of our friends. I have to get rid of my brownies. I don't have to do that. I have to get rid of YouTube. I don't have to do that. What I do have to do is I have to give it its space, and I have to be able to give my goal its space also. According to the author, and this is good, because we've all been to the grocery store, I think. At least I'm guessing. He says that the design of the checkout lanes in the supermarket is a prime example of distractors. So you can go through the entire supermarket. You got your grocery list in hand. You know exactly what it is you're going to be getting. And when you get to the checkout, guess what's there? All the sweets, all the cookies and M&Ms and Reese's peanut butter cups and mint and gum and soda. As you're sitting there and you're waiting in line, this is a chance for you to decide whether or not you can actually exercise willpower. Excuse me, ma'am. If none of those things existed at the checkout zone, maybe you wouldn't have thought to get them. The fact that they're there and easily accessible makes it a lot harder for you to walk away from it. So what you should do with this knowledge when it comes to being great at whatever task you've assigned for yourself, if it's a work task, the author suggests that you clear your desk. He says if you don't have that many distractions on your desk, you're going to be able to spend time doing that thing that you want to do for a longer amount of time. So clear your desk, get rid of the distractions, put your phone away. If you have kids, send them off to a babysitter, give them something that they need to be doing. Otherwise, if you don't, they're going to continue to bother you. The author continues to give another really cool example. I think this example is amazing because it depicts, again, the fact that we have weakened willpower most of the time. He says that there is a study that was done, and so there are people who were given different jars with Hershey's chocolate kisses. There was a study where, or a group of people were given the kisses in a clear jar, a group of people were given the kisses in an opaque jar, and then the jar was placed on desks, and then the jars were also placed 6 feet away from them. And as you could imagine, if it was a clear jar that was sitting on the desk, the participants ate more kisses from out of the jar. If the jar was opaque, they ate a little less. If the jar was clear, but placed 6 feet away, they ate more. But if the jar was opaque and 6 feet away, they ate way less. But that's obvious, right? Okay, because we know how our brains work. We can't quite see the distraction as good, so we kind of forget about it. But the cool thing is they were able to quantify that the people who ate the least amount of kisses from the opaque jar that was placed 6 feet away said that they thought that they had eaten more candy throughout the day. And the reason that they thought they had eaten more candy throughout the day is because the task had become harder for them. It was harder for them to see, they had to think about it more, and then they had to get up and go get it. So somewhere in there, they're like, oh, I must have eaten like 5,000 pieces of candy today, because that extra 6-foot walk was really taxing. But again, this is good information for you, for me, when we're really trying to dig deep into something. We have to be able to take whatever our distractors are and put them in their place, make it harder to get to. Ultimately, you want to create an environment for yourself that is clear of distractions and obvious temptations. Once you put them away, it's going to help you stay focused on whatever you're doing for just a little longer. The author also goes on to talk about the default effect, which I kind of already alluded to. We're lazy and will happily accept whatever is in front of our faces. Making decisions requires energy. If you reduce distractions from your environment, you'll clear your mind, which in turn increases focus, efficiency, and productivity. Furthermore, you can use your dopamine reward system to your advantage by reinforcing your newly found good habits. The next topic the author kind of goes into is called attention residue. And I've heard of this one too. If you've never heard of this one, this is good. And this has to do with multitasking. You can take a guess here, but is multitasking good or is multitasking bad? And it's interesting because I think we're required to multitask. I think that usually the way that our work systems are set up is they give us a bunch of things, not even our work system, our people life system. They give us a bunch of things that we need to do. We have accumulated a bunch of things that we need to do, and we're trying to get so many things done. The reality is you can only do one thing at a time. And so if you can only do one thing at a time and your brain is bouncing around trying to do lots of different tasks, it takes time, energy, momentum, and effort to switch your brain to a new task. Okay, I'm recognizing that I'm going off because, again, I've heard of attention residue before. So let me bounce back down to what the author says. The author says that you cannot switch seamlessly between tasks without a delay. So when you switch from task A to task B, your attention doesn't immediately follow. A residue of your attention remains stuck thinking about the original task. So we've all experienced times in our life in which we're stuck on something, we are doing something, and then what ends up happening is somebody comes in and they're like, hey, can I get this, or your brain pops to something and you're like, oh crap, I'm supposed to be doing this and this, and so you try to switch into that next zone. Well, when you come back to what you were originally doing, it takes 10-15 minutes to get back on track. Chances are very likely whatever you have shifted your mind to, you probably are still thinking about the original task. The author went on to talk about multitasking and why it's terrible, what it does to your brain, how long it takes for you to recover from multitasking, why you can't concentrate, all these things. It's weird, again, because we are forced to multitask, but he says, here's some things that you can do, and it's called single tasking. Ooh, that's genius sounding, right? Single tasking, okay? So to set everything else aside and do whatever task you have on your list right then. And I can't even tell you how much more productive my days are when I know exactly what I'm doing, what I have blocked off for that time. And also, you just have like a little notebook or post-it notes next to you, and when your brain wants to go somewhere else, it's like, oh yeah, I remember that I have to do such and such, which happens a lot to me. I'll just jot a note down, and so it goes, and then that way when I come back to it, I can put it into my calendar or section it off or give it a place so that it can again have my full attention. The next tactic the author gives is batching, and this is where you take light tasks, things that are very similar, and you give it that time. So if you have a bunch of computer tasks, maybe you're writing something, maybe you're checking emails, you're gonna batch those ones together because you're already there. I have found that it is a lot, there are things that I prefer to do. So, the things that I prefer to do, I batch those together. That's my reward. I get in, I start my day, I do my computer stuff, I do my email stuff, and then I get up, I walk around, and I come back, and then I get to do the fun stuff. Because if I wait to the end of the day to do the boring stuff, well, it makes the end of my day a lot longer and boring. Again, he just goes on to go in real detail about switching from task to task and how it takes it's a large mental burden, because you're essentially stopping and starting from zero numerous times. And not to do that, it takes so much energy, it makes you so tired, and then at the end of the day, you really don't have as much to show for it. What you have is a bunch of tasks that you've started, but not a bunch of tasks that you've finished. The don't do list, page 137 here. Everyone knows the value of a to-do list, but the author says, do you have a don't do list? And I don't know if I personally have a don't do list. I feel the same about both lists. Don't do, we should obviously know what we don't need to do, and then to do, we obviously also know what it is we need to do. But according to the author, make sure that you have both lists. You understand exactly what it is you're supposed to be doing, exactly what it is you shouldn't be doing. If you have a clear focus on both of those things, it's going to help you stay on track for your goals. The last one is a little hard for me, the 40 to 70 rule. 40% to 70% rule, I think it is, but I think I'm going to simplify it. It's not that I don't understand it, it's just that I always get thrown off when people throw percentages at me, like you should know 40% of this and 70% of this. It's like, how do you know when you get to 40%? You don't know. But I do understand what the author is saying. The author is saying that sometimes that sweet spot is right outside of your comfort zone. So he is pretty much saying that once you have just enough information to get started, get moving. What are you waiting for? Stop researching. Because a lot of times people will spend so much time researching a thing that they research themselves to death and they never actually start doing the thing that they want to do. It's going to hold you captive. You are going to paralyze yourself from actually moving forward. And it really just is all about comfort zones. We all know what comfort zones can do for you. It's going to stunt your growth. Specifically, according to the author, he says that many of us are reluctant to take actions outside of our comfort zones unless we have all the pertinent information that we need. But he also says that you can have too much information. Once you know about 40%, but not more than 70% of whatever it is you're doing. That's enough for you to know what's going on, not enough for you to paralyze your decision making, enough for you to still be excited, and enough for you to still be naive about it. Something about naivety I think is good. He says this way of thinking leads to more action than not. The next tactic in this awesome chapter of minimizing distractions, or the no distraction zone, is do nothing. Which, just by the title, I was a little confused, but as I continued to read, I understood that burnout is a very real risk. I think that sometimes when we say take a break, rest, relax, that people just automatically decide they're not going to do anything at all. Like, your brain needs time to recover. It needs time, but it doesn't need all the time. So if you're taking a whole crash course days on recovery, you're not setting up enough little break times along the way. He says that we seek to intentionally pack our days full of activities, whether or not they're professional, social, and we're going to try to squeeze like every bit out of our life that we can. But he also says that ironically, this quickly becomes counterproductive because very few people have a battery that can function like that. And as for what that means for your brain, any shred of fatigue will affect your clarity of thought. That's why we function better when we slept or we've eaten or our basic biological needs have been met. He also says what is the least obvious. I mean, we have our biological needs, but what's the least obvious is that disconnecting from everything and doing nothing at all can be a path to creating greater creativity and insight. And he says there's a reason why we zone out. And while we're zoning out, like we're working through our life's issues, or we're having moments of peace or creativity. Like, zoning out is actually really, really good for us. I know that, again, when it comes to just social media, when I decided, hey, I'm going to go through this book, I'm going to read it, I have done less social media because I didn't want the influence of other people coming through in what I was saying or how I was interpreting it or what's going on or how I needed to relate it to anything. I just wanted to sit and read a book and have my brain like latch on to the information that was being poured into my head and me figure it out. So zoning out, according to the author, is great. The author also mentions meditation is good, or practicing mindfulness is good. And he says that it's being pushed pretty hard these days, but for good reason. It intentionally slows you down. And again, I think I talked about this in the last chapter. Most of these things someone has already suggested that you do. Most of these things someone has said, hey, have you tried this? Hey, have you tried that? And because it has this connotation, maybe negative or lazy or weird or foo-foo, we don't tend to do these things, but somebody is telling you to do these things because they've done the research. Somebody is telling you to do these things because they've dug into, research how the brain actually works. And they're saying, this is how your brain works, regardless of whether you like it or not. This is what's going on up here in your dome. And so if you're having issues with being successful, if you're having issues with being productive, if you're having issues finishing what you start, try some of these tactics because they work with your brain. You might be working against it, but these tactics work with your brain and your mental stubbornness and can help you get back on track to those goals. The author says if you are concerned about what meditation looks like, or mindfulness looks like, or zoning out looks like, he says don't think of it as rest. Think of it as recovering so that you can get ready when you need to really think creatively. We instinctively know when to sleep, when to stretch, when to warm up our bodies if we have an athletic competition, but we disregard the same for our minds. And it's because our minds are so powerful. We are capable of so much. We put ourselves through so much. And it's not to say that you can't continue to do so, but if you want to be the highest functioning version of yourself. You got to throw in some mindfulness. You got to throw in some peace and quiet. I love the way the author ends this particular chapter. And he says, allow yourself to daydream. Because when was the last time your daydreams were boring and routine versus creative and outlandish? If you need a break, resist the urge to pick up your phone and scroll through your social media. Just staring out into blank space might be a better use of your time. And on that note, we are closing out chapter 6. Only a couple of chapters left. I hope you are enjoying the book as much as I am. We're on the road to finishing what we start because we are the best versions of ourselves. We are the most creative versions of ourselves. We are the most relaxed and rested and focused versions of ourselves. All right, next week, we're doing chapter 7, Deadly Pitfalls. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.